Have you experienced the awesome power of the Panasonic Real 3DO system? Obviously.
Presenting 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe. It's time to put away your toys.
3DO from Panasonic, Gold Star, and Creative Labs. A new low price and free games.
Mind-blowing graphics of Panasonic Real 3DO. 3DO.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 3DO Experience, the retrospective podcast talking about the 3DO interactive multiplayer system, the company behind it, and everything in between. I am Bill, and my co-host is Thrak. How you doing, Thrak?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
I had a week from hell last week, and then this week. Today, I literally spent my entire day making this part for a job that everybody in the building knows isn't going to work, but they want to do it anyways just to see.
I'm not sure what that's a very vague way of putting that.
Basically, it's like we're having issues with these, with a grinding table, and like the machine keeps erroring out, and basically it was under warranty, but the warranty guys don't want to actually fix it because that would require them to pay money. So they're just giving us kind of like a wild goose chase kind of situation.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that.
And their newest thing is oh, the parts are vibrating too much, so that's why it's erroring out. And we're like, that doesn't make any sense, but whatever. So they wanted us to box it in. So I spent the entire day making this box contraption.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, this isn't going to do anything. It's just going to be a waste of time and money. And I was like, yep, but they want it done, so I'm going to do it anyways.
I mean, they're wasting your time and money, so might as well, right?
Well, I get paid by the hour, so
there you go.
I'm just doing shit to do shit.
Yeah, at my job today, we had the it's that yearly employee survey thing. And what was so funny is when I first get into work, my supervisor pulls me aside and says, "Hey, let's just get this done, and then we can get to the real stuff." And the manager of the whole store was meeting with 6 or 7 people because that's just how many computers they had free to do it with, and basically was saying to us that the survey's a little different. So now when it says the company, it's not referring to corporate as a whole. It's referring to your store, which basically says to me that corporate doesn't give a shit about our opinions anymore when it comes to any critiques we have of them and the things that they're doing, because they've done some things I have issues with, and I'm pretty sure they're still dealing with a couple of lawsuits, but with the union. But basically the store manager was just you can say whatever you want, but if it's a lot of negative stuff, then district people are going to come in and micromanage everybody. So I just kind of was just whatever. And I had a few complaints, but they were worded things. It wasn't the strongly agree or whatever. So
yeah,
just kind of left it at that. But I always give I always gave high marks to my my immediate supervisor, my department manager, because he's great. He's the only reason I still work at that job. So
yeah. No, we had the opposite kind of situation where it was kind of the higher ups from because I work for Callaway Golf, so it's the higher ups from California were in to inspect the our division, and basically they just beat down on all the supervisors, and in turn all the supervisors were beating down on the employees because they got beat down on and they were just pissed off, and it was yeah, this sucks. So it was just one of those days where everybody was just in a mood.
Sadly, that's just how it works.
Yep. See, thankfully we're union, so they can't fire us for anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're union as well, but it feels like the longer I'm there, the further things the union can do get stripped back to a certain degree. But I feel like that's almost representative of the US as a whole, just constantly taking away union power till it's almost the union's just there as a placeholder. It's not how it used to be, where unions fought really, really hard for your jobs. But then there became a point where, workers' rights was actually really good. So the unions kind of, laxed off a bit. And then a lot of those, anti-union people took advantage of that and started stripping away their rights. But we're not here to discuss the history of unions and workers' rights. This isn't that kind of podcast.
No, I wouldn't be able to do more than an episode, probably.
Fair enough.
But we are here to talk about obscure video games from the 90s, so...
Yes, our specialty.
And particularly for a certain console that no one seems to remember.
We are the number one 3DO podcast in the world. I think I can safely say that.
Yep. We're also the only active 3DO podcast, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I'll take it.
But yeah, so once again, guys, we're discussing the 3DO, and today we're actually going to be talking about what is arguably by a lot of 3DO fans, because that there is actually 3DO fans, believe it or not. Like, there's a large community of 3DO players out there.
There's a whole subreddit.
There is. They actually just came back because they were still dark for a while. Hilariously enough. But yeah, so arguably the 3DO has certain games that are considered like killer apps for the console, like the games that like people actually will buy a 3DO just to play in. The one we're talking about today is actually considered one of those, and that is actually Road Rash for the 3DO.
Yeah, Road Rash, a series that doesn't exist anymore. Or I think like one of those series that EA just kind of killed because, you know, they couldn't get as much money out of it as they wanted, I think.
It kind of ran its course, and then they just, Need for Speed was just selling more, so they just kind of stuck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you think Road Rash could make a comeback?
Well, there is actually a Road Rash spiritual successor out there right now called Road Redemption.
Okay.
I don't know if it did particularly well. It was released for Xbox One, PS4, and Steam back in 2018.
Okay. It's got some good reviews. I've actually never heard of this game.
I only learned about it doing research.
All right.
Which leads me to believe it didn't do particularly well because no one talked about it.
Yeah, I'm not getting any sales data, but people seem to be, the people who I think played it seem to be high on it, like really high reviews on Steam.
Oh, it's on Switch. I might have to go download that later today.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll check it out on the Xbox because that's what I do. Let's see, it's $20 right now.
Oh, that's not bad.
Not a bad price at all. I actually almost might hunt down a physical of this if it exists.
I'm not sure if it does. That's the thing.
Well, I will find out and I'll let you know.
Okay. But anyway, so getting into Road Rash, it was a series that mostly ran from 1991 up until 2003. And I didn't know this initially, but the first couple games of the series were exclusively released on the Genesis, of all things.
Yes. This was that era where EA was pumping out stuff on the Genesis like crazy. I mean, there's the whole history behind that where EA wanted Sega to give EA more royalties for like the games that they would make or whatever, like Sega take less of a cut. And Sega was like, no, what are you going to do? Reverse engineer like the Sega Genesis so you learn how to make your own carts for it? And lo and behold, they did. And because of that, Sega entered into an agreement with them afterwards to actually get some of the money, because this was that time where EA was really starting to pick up steam. Like Madden was starting to come around and it was successful right off the bat. Like EA Sports was just starting to kick off at that time. You had the Road Rash games, among other weird stuff they were doing. Like, what's that game called? Is it called Poltergeist? Is that like the EA game where you're a ghost and the object is to scare people who live in the house?
I believe so.
Yeah. I played that once because I think EA put it out on the PSP in like a weird little collection they did. And that game's really cool. If y'all haven't played it, y'all should play it. It's actually a really unique concept for a game, especially from that time.
Like, this was the era of EA where they actually were kind of a cool company before they just became the corporate entity they are today.
Yeah. It's that thing where like EA from like this era all the way to like right when the 360 started coming out, that they were really, really good. Because I have a huge soft spot for EA during the PS2 GameCube era, where like EA Sports was doing really well. They had EA Sports Big with the NBA and NFL Street
loved
games.
All of the extreme sports like side imprints they had going on back in the day.
The SSX games, Those were all fantastic. And then on top of that, you had the Battlefield stuff was kicking off. They were making those Lord of the Rings license games, which were fantastic. They made a hidden gem from the era that I really like, a game called Freedom Fighters, which is like a squad-based like third-person shooter that I've always had a soft spot for that. But even through the 360 era, they're still making some really interesting games.
I was about to make a comment
like the
that they
Mercenaries
also
games, Dead Space, Dante's
Mm.
Inferno. I think they published Shadows of the Damned. So
The Sims, SimCity.
Oh yeah, The Sims, of course, because they bought was it the Sid Meier?
Maxis.
Maxis, right? Yeah. So they have all that stuff as well. Like, I sometimes am a bit of an EA defender because I think their legacy content is really, really good, and when EA doesn't be EA and just lets people make good games, then they can make some really, really good stuff.
See, I'll always defend EA when people make the comment that they were never good, because I'm always like, no, that's just a lie, like a false statement.
Yeah, anybody who says that, I think, are like people younger than us who have a hard time understanding that EA used to, like, when you bought something that had the EA on it, it's like, oh, this is going to be quality.
Or even farther back when it just was a set Electronic Arts.
Oh yeah, because a lot
Which
of kids
they brought back.
don't even know what EA means.
They brought it back. It's Electronic Arts again. I noticed recently.
It's always Electronic Arts to me because I love that title. That's a great title.
I love the original Electronic Arts logo sound, like when it would pop up and do that kind of like electronic sounding Electronic Arts.
I remember the EA Games Challenge Everything.
That was a good one too.
I remember that one.
When they dropped the games is when they got kind of meh to me.
Yeah, and the famous EA Sports, it's in the game, or EA Sports. I always like that one.
I loved how all the companies had those special extreme logos. Like Activision had Activision O2 for a while there, and
yeah, I remember that. That was on the Tony Hawk stuff, right?
And then Acclaim had AKA Acclaim, which was the weirdest one.
Yeah, that was such a weird time, those extreme sports games.
Yeah.
And in a way, Road Rash, to bring it back, is kind of one of the earliest extreme sports games. Even though racing games have always been they get grouped in with sports games, but I feel like they are their own genre. But Road Rash is so different than most of the racing games at the time.
Yeah,
that it almost kind of sits weird. It's almost like a cousin to Tony Hawk.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I mean, because there was motorcycle racing games in the past, Sega had Hang On, but they were never this kind of game.
Yeah, they were just trying to be your Rally X or Pole Position, but with bikes. Whereas Road Rash tries to do something completely different, I think.
By adding in a combat mechanic.
Yeah, by adding in the combat mechanic, which is really fun. And they just further refined the games as they went. And yeah, on the Genesis, that original trilogy is some of the best racing games you can get on the Genesis. They still hold up, and their soundtracks are phenomenal. That weirdly FM synthesis distorted metal sound is really,
what the
really
Genesis
cool.
was perfect for.
Oh, absolutely. And in a way, Road Rash almost kind of defines what EA was at the time.
Oh yeah,
this kind of ragtag group that was getting a lot of success and treating it as we're not corporate yet. So it's they're just kind of having fun with all this success that they were having.
What's really interesting about the progression of Road Rash is the first two games were made for the Genesis. Then they decided to split, because obviously by 94. So it gets a little confusing because technically some people think this game is the first Road Rash. It actually is the third Road Rash technically.
Yeah.
Because the 91 game is the first one. This is specifically the 94 rendition of the game. Yes. And it gets a little confusing because this game technically came out before Road Rash 3. Because they were made tandemly at the same time. EA themselves were actually making Road Rash 3, which I thought was funny. This game was actually developed by a side studio known as Monkey Do Productions.
Well, they did the 3DO and the Sega CD versions.
Yes, and the Sega CD version is basically a different game.
Yeah, that one's probably closer to the Genesis versions, but with CD quality music.
From what I've read, it's Road Rash 3, but with the cutscenes and soundtrack from this game.
Okay, but probably in a worse quality because of the Sega CD. because
Yeah.
also this, as has been mentioned, this game, it's also out on the PlayStation 1, the Sega Saturn, and the PC, but that was done by a completely different dev studio.
Buzz Puppet
So
Productions.
yeah, so
What a name.
while sometimes when you mention this game, people are like, "Oh, you can play like the PS1 version." I mean, you can, and I played it a little bit. It's not the same. Like, it's
No.
similar. It's very similar, but it doesn't have that same sort of it factor, I guess, that this 3DO Road Rash has. Because funnily enough, I remember watching some video about Road Rash on the 3DO, and they'd mentioned that at the time, a lot of people called their 3DOs their Road Rash machine, because there are some people who would just play Road Rash on it because, you know, this game is really, really good. And yeah, in some ways is one of the killer apps for the system, and is like debatably the best game on the 3DO in general.
It's definitely a top 5 in my opinion anyways.
It's easily the best racing game. Like,
Yes.
I haven't played enough of like the Need for Speed on here to say, but this game is just great, which is weird because in a way this is just Crash and Burn again, because
it is, but it's like better in every way.
because it's a combat racer. You can only do a single race or a career mode, and in between you have to place at least third to qualify. You have money that you earn that you spend on upgrades in between the races. Like, it's all set up the exact same way. But this shows the power of, like, you know, game development or game design, where Road Rash takes the same concept but just does something that's much more fun with it. Like, it looks better, it runs better, it sounds better, I hope, it plays better, and it's just a great time. You know?
So interestingly about this game too is this game was a first in a lot of ways for the series. Like, the previous games used more Genesis style 2D, like it wasn't even mode 7, it was like that kind of pole position, like Rad Racer-ish style of 3D racing games.
Yeah.
At the time, which is fine. I mean, it still holds up pretty well, but it has its limitations. This version of Road Rash was, so the worlds were full 3D, like actually had like terrain and like depth to them.
Yeah.
The racers, on the other hand, though, were, as I was reading, they were actually kind of like Mortal Kombat style, the digital actors digitized.
Yeah, that was a bit of a fad in the mid 90s, having, you know, digitized characters in video games. You know, like, yeah, Mortal Kombat was the big one for that. It's obvious when you play some like knockoff Mortal Kombat games from that era, like
one on this console.
Yeah, or Kasumi Ninja for the Jaguar, where it's like they're using digitized actors because they just assume that's the way to go.
Yeah, or Street Fighter, the movie, the game.
It's not that bad. But then you have games like Road Rash, and I think, and even John Madden Football, that are using digitized characters in place of, like, you know, 2D sprites or even like early 3D models.
Well, it was cheaper to do than like CGI pre-renders like Donkey Kong Country was doing at the time.
Yeah, and it gives the game its own kind of like identity to it, because I think the motorcycles are also like digitized.
They are.
Yeah. So
this game looks really good even today.
Yeah, it has a style to it, you know, outside of the art, the menu art. It does kind of have a style to it, you know, like having those 3D backgrounds that run smooth most of the time. I don't know about you, but my experience is the frame rate would chug at like more intense moments.
Yeah, a lot of shit goes on during gameplay.
Yeah, but there are other moments where it is very smooth. Like I think it hits 30 a couple times. I'm not sure about the frame rate, but it looks like it does hit the max frame rate it's going for some of the time. But then, yeah, other times it completely chugs. But in my opinion, it didn't get in the way of the gameplay.
Yeah, it's interesting how this game still looks really good compared to, like, say, Crash and Burn, which, I mean, for the time it probably looked great, but nowadays it's kind of very much a 90s game.
Yeah, like this game blows it out of the water. Like,
oh yeah,
absolutely blows it out of the water.
And another thing this game was famous for was its pre-rendered cutscenes that they added in, which I'm not pre-rendered cutscenes, full motion video cutscenes.
I like those.
They are so 90s in the best way possible.
Yes, there you can tell it was like the dev team. It was probably just the dev team and like maybe a couple hired actors like just went to the parking lot in the street by where they were making the game and just had fun for a couple hours. You know, like they're very over the top and kind of like, cheesy in a way, but they have a charm to them. And they're a lot of fun to watch. They repeat often, but there is enough of them that they don't cycle through them so much that you get kind of sick of them. It's like, oh, there's the one for finishing first, here's the one for finishing second, finishing third, like crashing your bike, getting pulled over by the police, all these, like everything has a specific FMV cutscene for it. And you always want to watch it the first time because you get a kick out of it. But
Oh yeah, the getting arrested one is always my favorite because it's like, holy shit, like they really went all out with this.
oh yeah, you can tell they had a lot of fun making those cutscenes, and it does kind of resonate on the player that like, oh yeah, they're having a lot of fun, and yeah, and this game also reflects it too. This game's a lot of fun.
Speaking of like period piece, though, another thing this game is very well remembered for is its soundtrack, and particularly its opening cutscene music, which is Rusty Cage by Soundgarden, which was huge at the time.
Yeah, it's so weird that they got like the licensed music, yet as far as I know, the licensed music, it's only in the menus. Like
Yeah,
when you're
so
playing the game, it's not that. Like the game music, I assume, is just like music that the dev team made to just put in there when you're racing.
so the way
Because
it
as had
works,
been mentioned in the last episode, I could not get the in-game music to play while I was driving. Something about not having enough memory or something.
so
I couldn't. I
I actually
couldn't find
did
a
some
definitive.
research on this.
Okay.
Apparently, it's an issue specifically with the Gold Stars and the FC10s for whatever reason.
Is something to do with the chipset?
Yes,
Okay.
because they
That makes
changed
sense.
sets at various points.
Okay, that only makes sense to me because the research I did, people were saying it does depend on which 3DO you have. Because this is an early 3DO game. This came out, I think, like July '94.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was like a month before I was even born. So, it was early in the life. So that might have been why it was kind of basing itself on the FC1 and all that, which is a shame that I can't get that music while I'm playing because, as has been mentioned, the Road Rash soundtracks are usually pretty solid.
So the music, the way it works is it actually it does what like the Genesis or like SNES would do, and it synthesizes using the 3DO's built-in sound hardware. It's not as refined as the SNES sound card by any means, and it's not as fun as the Genesis sound card. But for what it does, it's pretty catchy stuff. Very drum and bass heavy,
Yeah.
which I enjoy. Fun fact: the Sega CD version actually uses the soundtrack in races.
Oh, that's nice.
It's the only version that does. Which
Was
is
that like a licensing thing? You
no.
think?
So the way I actually was reading about this, it's actually kind of fascinating. The reason why the soundtrack does not play in game is because the graphics and like gameplay is actually being streamed directly from the disc.
Okay.
And because it's streaming from the disc can't stream the audio, which is also on the disc at the same time. So they have to use the coding in the system's hardware to use the sound hardware instead. Basically, it's kind of like why the Atari Jaguar like version of Doom doesn't have any music because they were using the sound hardware to do other things.
Gotcha. And they couldn't like load the licensed music into like the RAM as you were playing or anything.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where they kind of had to sacrifice it for the sake of the gameplay, which I think was a plus because this game runs, as we said before, extremely well even today.
Yeah. It is a bit choppy, but I think it runs a lot better than I think Crash and Burn does. And yeah,
like you can tell very much that it's streaming off the disc because when you're playing, if you listen closely to your 3DO, you can hear the disc constantly, like the eye is constantly reading stuff.
Yeah, and I love in the like the menus whenever you like push down on like the menu, you can hear like the CD drive like chunking, so it can like go to the next one, which is very very of the time.
Yeah, 3DOs are infamous for their dead CD drives, and a lot of it is just because they didn't know how to make video game menus and stuff at this point, and a lot of things load when they really don't need to, and those things were working overtime at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm surprised mine still works as well as it does.
Yeah, same here, honestly. What's fun though is this is also that period of time where they really didn't know how to make menus for any game period, because the Road Rash menu it's easy enough to traverse, but it is so strange compared to like what you'd think of as like a traditional game menu.
It's a case of style over substance with the menus.
Mm.
Like they're trying to focus in on this like art that they've made for it, and having everything kind of be like themed with the game, like how the options is called the restroom,
Yeah.
and all this other stuff, and like in the big game mode, if you want to talk to the other racers, you have to go to schmooze.
Yeah.
Even though you can't really interact with them, they'll just show you the portraits of them, and just like a little bit of you of like them, just like a little phrase that they say to you, and that's kind of it. So
Yeah. One thing that's interesting too is so this game had a deal with A&M Records, obviously, which was Soundgarden's label at the time. And obviously most of the money went into getting Soundgarden for this game, but there also was a bunch of other smaller artists that were signed to A&M at the time that like I have never heard of in my life, but apparently were big enough at the time, like Monster Magnet, Paw, Swerve Driver, Therapy, and Hammerbox.
I love the name Swerve Driver. It's a
Yeah,
perfect band name for this. And even some of the bands, I forget which ones, I think Therapy is one of them, that if you hang in the menus long enough, they'll start playing a music video.
Yeah,
and I think
neat.
Therapy is one of them.
It's got a very 90s alt sound effect to it. And
yeah,
I mean, I like that kind of music, so I'm all for it, but it might not be for everybody, I will say.
It is funny you can connect Kurt Cobain to Road Rash.
Yeah, you can. In a weird way.
Because like I wouldn't associate Nirvana's music with driving, but Soundgarden's considered part of the big four of grunge, so there you go.
Yeah. Now Rusty Cage, on the other hand, though, that song screams driving.
Oh God, yes. But
even the Johnny Cash cover. I love that.
So,
cover.
Do you want to talk about the menu art?
Yeah, it's something.
It's very of the time, like that fisheye lens thing, and all these like exaggerated like character proportions, and I don't know what they were yeah, because I don't know what they were going for, because it doesn't really fit with the rest of the game.
No, it was very much like EA just at the time, like kind of trying things just to see what would stick, and I don't think it stuck, but
no, I consider it. If any of our listeners know who Red Letter Media is, one of the guys on there is named Rich Evans, our Lord and Savior. He classified this kind of stuff as commercial surrealism, which was quite a big thing in the 90s, where there was a lot of like avant-garde surrealist imagery going around like in the mainstream, but I think people were doing it just because they could and not because they had any reason for it. Like, say what you will about avant-garde experimental art, a lot of times there is intent behind what they're trying to do. Like, there's a reason it can be kind of out there. But with Road Rash, it falls under that commercial surrealism where there's not really any reason to. They're just doing it because it's like a hip, trendy thing to do.
Yeah, this was just kind of a case of they wanted to do something different.
Yeah, and it dates the game.
Yeah.
Like, really, because the rest of the game, as far as I'm considered, hasn't aged that badly. No. It definitely is a game from 94, but, for what it is, it holds up decently well.
See, the biggest like way I can tell this game is definitely from like the mid 90s is like you click on like the thrash mode menu and you get the low angle shot of the blonde lady in like the mini skirt, and it's like, or short shorts, I can't really tell, probably a mini skirt.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like they knew what they were doing there.
That they did.
But it's like that's such a 90s thing where it's like fan service because girls don't play video games. What are we talking about? Because how stereotypical was it at the time?
Yeah, I think it was just like around that time. I think video game companies were like, oh, we have to market our stuff to boys or girls. We can't do both. So we decided to market it towards the boys and left the girls to the side.
Yeah.
But you and me, we both know plenty of girls who play video games. So
Well, yeah,
a lot of that stuff has gone away now, I think.
it has. I mean, back in the day too, a lot of them weren't. I mean, girls played video games back then too, but a lot of them weren't super open about it at the time because it was the style at the time. Not everything was as simple as it is now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Shout out to all of our female listeners. I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Yep. Shout out to Alex, my co-host on a Gaming and Collecting podcast.
Yeah.
Even though this is not a game she would play at all.
She wouldn't get a kick out of this one?
She enjoyed. So when we did the 3DO episode for the GNC, she did enjoy it. But she was like, I'd never play that on my own unless like someone like had me play it. And I was like, that's fair.
Because it is, like it's very off-putting. Like getting to the game is kind of like the rough part because you're like, what is this menu? What the hell is this art style? What is the game doesn't really explain what anything is. You just kind of have to figure it out. Like it's very archaic in that part of it.
And this wasn't even exclusive to this game. This was just a 3DO thing.
Yeah, a lot of style over substance. But thankfully, this game has some substance to it.
Yeah.
Because as we had mentioned, there's like the Thrash mode, which is just your single race. Though this game does have one up on Crash and Burn. There is a 2-player mode.
Yes.
But it is hidden deep in the menus. Like you have to go into like the menu and I don't even think it's like a multiplayer thing. It's just like a different game mode selection and you choose if you want 1 or 2 players.
Yeah, that was another thing about the 3DO that was really confusing was like a lot of the multiplayer modes on 3DO games were like hidden and you had to find them.
Yeah, and like I have the box with me right now and it doesn't even say if it's like 2-player or not, you know? So,
yeah.
I don't have the manual for this one, sadly, so I can't go through that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, that was
I can imagine the manual has some gold in it.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Like going through any like 3D big box 3DO games are like a treasure trove of just wonders because like you find so many hilarious things that you just look at and you go, this doesn't make any sense game wise, like by like video game standards now, but like for the time you're like, this must have been really neat.
Yeah, like one of the quotes on the back of the box is, in-game action digitized from real life for vicious combat you can almost feel.
Yeah.
Love that.
Also, unlike Crash and Burn, you can actually crash in this game.
Yes, you can. And
it is glorious.
Yes, but goddamn does it suck.
Oh, yeah. No, it ruins your race if you do crash, but there's just something hilarious.
Not necessarily.
Well, you can recover, but you have to be quick.
It depends on when you crash.
See, my favorite is like when you crash into like a pedestrian walking across the street while you're going like freaking Mach 6 and you just fly through the air and it's just like, whoa.
An old lady crossing the street in her walker.
Yeah, she's like...
Or you run over like a puppy or something.
She's like as sturdy as a fucking pole and like you just fly across the screen.
She doesn't move at all. So yeah, there's the Thrash mode, which is your standard single race mode, which I didn't really play because I was interested in the quote-unquote story mode, the big game mode, which operates about the same as Crash and Burn, but I think it's done better. So there are 5 racetracks in the game. Is it 5?
Yeah, I believe it's like 5 or 6, I want to say.
But the races aren't laps. They are like destinations. So when you go into big game mode, you choose one of the characters that you want to be. And they're different only in the sense of like what bike they start with and if they have a weapon, basically. Like there's a couple, like somebody will have a chain or somebody will have their fists or whatever. I chose Jim or Slim. I think his name is Slim Jim because he comes with a pipe.
Yes.
And the pipe is really, really good. It makes a nice thunk sound when you hit somebody with it. And it has some solid distance, and it just drains people's health when you have to hit them and knock them off. Because the only combat that comes from the game is if, say, you come right up to somebody on a motorcycle, be it a fellow racer or even a cop on a bike. You can just reach out and just beat the shit out of them until they fly off their bike. And being able to do that and not crash is very, very satisfying.
That's the coolest thing about this game because you're going so freaking fast and like the bikes handle very much like bikes. Like they don't just feel like cars on like a on like a track, like you actually like have to hold on, like in like properly like angle your turns, or else you're gonna wipe out, which is very satisfying once you master like the feel of it.
And the controls, I think, are very simple.
Hmm.
You know, like you hold, what I like is, yeah, you hold B to accelerate. And then I think it's either A or C can be your attack button. So you can just like hold B, right? And then shift a little bit of your thumb onto C to hold it. And then your character will automatically determine if the bike that you're trying to hit's on your left or right. And it'll just do the clobbering for you while you hold B. And I believe L and R can also be like turn, quote unquote turn, as is your left and right on the D-pad, because there's not really turns, you know, like there's no like hard turning or anything.
No, it's like a bike. You actually have to like you kind of use your body to turn a lot of the times.
Yeah, well, because the tracks just kind of bob and weave. You know what I mean? There's no like, you know, long curves or like drifting or anything like that you have to do.
Yeah, the turning is more for dodging cars and pedestrians and cows.
Essentially, because yeah, when you come up to like a curve, your bike just kind of automatically curves with it, but you do have to angle it a bit so you don't hit like a building or like a tree on the side of the road or something. So it's not too difficult to figure out control wise as well.
Very easy to pick up and play.
Yes. So in the big game mode, you get the 5 different tracks. And they're destination courses. They're not race courses. So you don't have to worry about laps or anything. And you have to qualify at least 3rd to, you know, to pass the race essentially. And then once you do all 5, you then go to level 2, where it's the same 5 again, but they're longer. So like one will be like, it'll say like 5.4 miles. And then the second time you do it, it'll be like 8 point something miles. And it just keeps going up to the end. I only did level 1 and level 2s. I think I finished one of the courses in level 3. I just didn't have enough time to do the whole thing. But I kind of got the gist of it as I kept going. And, you know, the drivers get, you know, better. They get better bikes as well. They can get more aggressive as they go on. Like the difficulty curve isn't as bad as Crash and Burn.
No, it's much more balanced. Something that EA was very good at this time.
Yes, because because with every race, what also I like is if you finish less than 3rd, you don't like get a game over or anything like that. You still get money if you finish, because I think it's like 15 drivers for every race. So
and this game has kind of an RPG element to it as well. RPG in a loose sense, kind of in the idea of like you get money at the end of each race, and because your bike actually does have a health meter, and if you damage your bike too much and you don't manage your money well, your game will end because your bike is no longer going to work, or say you get like fined by the police or something.
Yeah,
because you can't pay the fine.
Yeah, you can run out of money in game over, which really sucks. Because that actually did kind of put me back a little bit, because I finished up the level 1 courses and was just starting level 2. And I had spent basically all the money I had to upgrade my bike. And then I think I had like maybe $200 left. And
the rookie
on
mistake.
one of the courses, because it's not, the thing is with like the cops, they only pull you over if you have like crashed and they just happen to pull up to where you are, basically. Like it's the cops aren't really that much of a nuisance. It's almost just like you were unlucky, you know? And yeah, as you said, if you don't get any money, if you don't have any money for the fines, I think they fine you like $800 or something.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough fine.
Yeah, you game over. There is a save feature, so you can just kind of like, you know, save scum a little bit if you need to, but I hadn't saved at that point. So I had to redo the extra 1 or 2 level 1 levels I hadn't done up to that point, get to level 2, and then save, and then kind of go from there. And basically, after every race, I would just save to be sure, so I wouldn't, you know, lose any progress.
I guess kind of a running theme, though, for, I guess, this show, too. If you are an FC1 user and your memory is full, unfortunately, there's no way to manage it with Road Rash. So if it's full, you're out of luck unless you get a manager.
Yeah, because I didn't have that issue with FC10. I mean, I kept just overriding my save like crazy because that's just what I do. So,
yeah, FC1 doesn't give you that option, unfortunately.
Damn. because it's a very mid-90s thing
Mm-hmm.
where I think a lot of us are so used to auto saving where like games will just save like every 10 seconds or something.
Yeah.
Like say like Luigi's Mansion 3, like every time you walk through a door it just saves, you know. That like once I remember my son was playing that and I was telling him to turn it off and he's like, "Oh, I got to save the game, dad." And I'm like, "Just walk through a door." And he walked through the door and I'm like, "See, look, it saved. You're good." So,
It's such
we're
a
so
different time.
yeah, we're so accustomed to that playing a game like this, you know, when you screw up and you're like, "Oh, let me just, you know, go back." It's like, "Oh, you didn't save." So you have to go far back, you know.
I just feel
So
like that would be a fun, like, little running joke. Is anytime we talk about a game, I can mention, does it have a memory manager for FC1 players?
uh,
Usually, it's
well,
no.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there might be a couple, who knows.
There is a couple
Um
of games we will get to eventually that do have it.
oh, that's good. That's good. So so yeah, so that was basically yeah, the big game mode is essentially yeah, you just keep doing each of the 5 races. They get longer, they get a little bit harder, but you use the money that you get in between the races to buy the better bikes. And there's like the different sections. There's like the rat bikes, which I think was funny, just kind of the cheapies. There's the sport bikes, which are, you know, more like the medium ones, and then there's the super bikes,
Mm.
which I assume you don't really need to like level 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
But there is differences in like the speed and the handling. Because some do handle better than others. There are some bikes that are like really, really fast, but the handling kind of sucks on them. So, say in the city level, which I found the city level to be the hardest one because of all of the cars
Pedestrians and
and
cars.
pedestrians, and it's so easy to crash and just completely wreck yourself in that one. Though with the Pacific Coast Highway, a lot of people say that one's the hardest. I don't think it is. I just think there's one turn that if you mess it up, then you're done. It's like this one very specific turn where if you it's like I think you hit like a shed or something off the road, and if you mess up, your bike can like fly off into it's essentially like a little like rocky area where like the ocean is. And if your bike hits there, you can't get it and you're just
Yeah.
screwed. It's just like a dead zone basically. So
See, the
that
countryside levels aren't super hard. There's just always the occasional, like, you'll straight up pull like a twister and just be like, cow, another cow.
yeah, yeah. And I like how the road layouts are like constantly changing.
Oh yeah,
Where
that's
like
like my favorite part about these levels is that they like are super non-repetitive and like you just like kind of like go through them and you never get bored.
yeah, like cuz I think all the track layouts are the exact same. Like for each race, it's like, oh, this is the city map, you know.
It's basically just
But
a winding straight line.
yeah, basically, but the cars and the pedestrians and everything, I think that is randomized.
Yes.
So there is that level of surprise there, and sometimes you'll be driving through and you'll see like there's this one car and then there's like 3 or 4 bikes where like everybody just kind of ran into this one car, and you can like zip by it and go like ha ha, and then you immediately hit something and then your bike goes flying and then you have to go grab it. Because
Yeah.
one thing that's annoying is when you crash, like you have to like run and get your bike, and you run really slow.
Yes, you do.
And so like there have been times where I'm in first, right? Like just killing it. And then I crash. And then when I'm running to get my bike, by the time I get it, I'm like 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And again, depending on where you are in the race, like yes, you can recover. Like a crash doesn't immediately doesn't, you know, wreck your chances. But it can be annoying depending on how far in the race that you are. So like when you're hitting the big game mode, it's always best to look at how long the track is. If it's like 8 point something miles, like keep track of that.
Mm.
So when you're driving, like say if you crash and you're at like 7.9 of like an 8.4, you know, you're basically screwed at that point.
Yeah, it's not an unfair game, but it is an unforgiving game at times, depending on your luck.
Yes.
But that's kind of a racing game thing in general.
Yes, luck does play into it, but skill also plays into it. So if you get really good at learning how to like weave in and out of traffic, it can really help. Because there have been times where I have to like sneak between 2 cars, Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But the more I played it, the better I got at sneaking between those two cars, because you're gonna have to at some points.
Yes, like this is very much I'd say so. There's arcade style racing games. This is more of a technical racing game, but it's
I
still
think
arcadey to a degree.
I mean, I think it's closer to an arcade racer than, say, like a hardcore sim racer. You know?
True. It's kind of an in betweenish like kind of way, because it's not full on arcade, but it's also not. It's obviously not a sim racer.
Yeah, like it's closer to a cruisin' than like a Gran Turismo,
Yes.
but it does kind of operate somewhere in the middle. You know, because I wouldn't even compare this game to like other combat racers, like say like a Twisted Metal or something. You know, like that's very much its own beast entirely.
Yeah. Well, a Twisted Metal gets rid of the racing element and is more just straight up about the combat. And this is more along the lines of, I guess, like they're not really the same, but like a Wipeout, like where it's like combat mixed with all out racing.
Yeah, yeah. Or even, honestly, maybe even closer to like a Mario Kart, where it is a race and then there is like combat that's involved. But at the end of the day, but unlike a Mario Kart with Road Rash, I think your racing skill matters more than your item luck.
Yeah. Like, because Mario Kart is very much, there is skill to it, but it's very much luck based, especially like with the items.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rubber banding in Mario Kart.
Yeah. I mean, most Mario Kart races end with me leading like 5 seconds away from the finish line, and then a blue shell hits. So, and then I finished 12th.
There's that infamous video, I'm sure you've seen it, of, I think it was like Princess Daisy. She was leading first. She got like blue shelled, bullet billed a couple times, a couple red shells, knocked off the bridge like twice, and ended up She was first and ended up dead last.
Yep, that's Mario Kart for you.
Yeah, thankfully Road Rash doesn't have that. The combat is very simple. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, it's really exciting. Like you get like, oh, I get to use my pipe on somebody or whatever.
It's really entertaining, because you're kind of like, you have to like just position it just right, but you also have to keep in mind you're racing, so you can't like completely forget about the actual track ahead of you. Like there'll be times where like I get super into the combat and then I don't see the old lady walking across the street, and then just bam.
Yeah, it's like you'll smack the car or something, and it just completely screws you up. I've never had anybody win a combat situation with me where they just hit me more. Though there are some racers that instead of punching, they'll do like a kick.
Yeah.
And if they kick you, then that sucks, because then you just fling off the side of the road and crash almost every time. And
see, what's funny about
what sucks,
the AI versus like you when playing is if the AI does try to punch you, the easiest way to avoid them is just move over, and then they like don't really pursue. If you start punching the AI though, they never like try to get away. They just kind of take it, and it's like, it's interesting.
Yeah, like the character Rhonda, she was the one I had the most combat with, because every time she would pull up, I'd just be like, all right, it's Rhonda again. You know? And yeah, when you'd hit them, they would just sit there.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't even try to like go against you at all.
You ever try to direct them into cars?
Unintentionally, I did that.
Sometimes I would be like, if like their health was too high, I'd just be kind of like, what if I can position this just right? Just an alternative method.
Yeah, but it does add an extra layer to the game that makes it a lot of fun. I'm sure in like a 2-player situation, that's probably where a lot of the fun would come in. You know, just
me
like
and
trying
Alex
to beat each other up.
one 2-player match, and it was pretty fun. Although, like, the split screen isn't the best. Yeah, I think it's just because split screen is just once you're used to like having your own screen. Like once you try to do split screen again after a long time, you're kind of like, eh.
Yeah, like I assume it's like the horizontal.
Yeah, it was
split screen.
Actually, no, I think it was vertical.
Really?
I think it was vertical. I'd have to redo it. It's been like 2 years since, but
okay. But it was fine for what it was.
Yeah, I think the frame rate wasn't as good too, because like 2-player modes always like killed the frame rate back in the day.
Well, it's extra stuff to deal with, you know. Because
Yeah,
I know the Sonic 2 multiplayer had kind of the same. I'm like, this isn't as smooth as a single player mode, and then that split screen, it's like everything is just really squished.
Yeah,
you know, Like, I don't know how I played that so much back in the day.
Yeah, you had to adapt back in the day. Now we're just so spoiled by like everyone having their own screen that it's hard to go back.
Yes, yeah. Playing split screen now always feels so weird.
It's a little it is nostalgic though, because you're kind of like, oh yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess we've talked about pretty much everything in the game. I guess talking about reception. So what's fun about reception is they don't even really list any of the other consoles. They only really talk about the 3DO version because that's really the only one that matters.
Yeah. Because
And
also reception, like this is considered the best game in the Road Rash series.
it is, which I
as a
find
whole.
crazy because it's like so obscure compared to like the rest of them.
Yeah. And I haven't really delved into the other Road Rashes to say, because I've played some of the Genesis ones and they're pretty good.
I
know
played
there's
3D on the PlayStation.
I heard that one isn't great.
It's okay. Like this one's much more fun.
Okay.
I'll
Because then
say.
there was Road Rash 64, which I never played that either.
Yeah, that was the weird time where like the PlayStation would get a version and then like the N64 would get its own version of a game that was completely different.
Yeah, or sometimes like Mega Man Legends. Like Mega Man Legends on N64 is just called Mega Man 64.
Yeah,
even
and
though
it's basically the same
game.
game, just a bit more condensed because N64.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's Road Rash Jailbreak, which I know it for the GBA version, not the PlayStation 1 version.
Yeah, and that was the
And-
final game in the series, I believe.
Yeah, and it is mediocre.
Yeah.
You know, like it has more to it as far as like modes and everything, but the gameplay isn't as fun. And I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure why. Because you think by this point they would know what works, but maybe it was just diminishing returns, or just EA wasn't putting in the same level of effort that they were putting into other series at
Yeah, I
that
think
point. Because
They had
by
given up by that point.
yeah, because by 2000 2003, like Need for Speed had taken off and was like the big one.
Yeah.
So they kind of let Road Rash, die. And then apparently there was a Road Rash game that was on like EA Mobile. Apparently.
It wouldn't surprise me. They had a lot of games they tried back then.
Yeah, hold on, let me see if I can find because I think it was on the Wikipedia for them. That it was Road Rash like 2009 for J2ME, like Java.
Oh god, that's a phrase that kids aren't going to get.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. It was sold on the EA mobile site only.
That was the mobile phone. J2ME was the mobile phone. It was basically before we had iOS and the Android store. That was like the game thing that they had to make all their games for.
Okay.
It wasn't good.
I mean, it didn't last, so I kind of safely assumed.
Yeah. Going back though, so talking about reception for this game received critical acclaim, which is insane for the time, especially for such an obscure console. But what's cool is the game got pretty much all like high 90s, like 80s, like four stars at most. The lowest review, ironically, was Famitsu, who gave it a 27 out of 40, because of course they did.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not like Famitsu reviews are ever.
Yeah.
They're always fair and legit.
But my favorite is the 3DO magazine gave it 5 out of 5 stars, because of course they did.
I love that there was a 3DO magazine.
Yeah.
It's very in line with like Nintendo Power and
I gotta
Sega's
find
magazine.
Sega Visions.
Sega Visions, yeah, and then the official PlayStation magazine
Yep.
came out as well.
I used to get that in the mail. That was a time.
I think Xbox had one too.
They did. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, but I never subscribed to any of those.
So we did it through the school because they had like a school function thing where like you could subscribe to 3 magazines, and it was like, of course, I got that, Tips and Tricks, and some other PC Gamer, I think, because it was the only other gaming one.
Oh yeah. I had a couple PC Gamers as well. Just I found them interesting to read.
I gotta look on eBay. I gotta see if this 3DO magazine actually exists. I gotta find a copy of this.
Yeah, that would be a fun review for the show, but we'd have to do some kind of like camera video for that.
Yeah. Speaking of reviews, we actually got one on Apple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I figured. I noticed it today when I was going through the the Apple thing, but we got
Oh, we got a review. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Road Rash.
no. We got a review for the show.
2 stars.
No, it was a 5 stars. The review was called 3D-O spelled OH. Look, a good a good podcast by I can't pronounce that. It's like Tin Chan. Well, that's what his Apple profile
Yeah.
is.
I
And the
was hoping
review
for a negative one because negative reviews of podcasts are always funny.
Yeah, we got none of those. We've had 3 ratings and 1 review, and the review was 3DO. Did you play it? No, of course you didn't. And since we didn't, and probably won't, let's listen to Bill and Thrak describe the history, games, and the current state of some cost and collecting while we do the dishes on a Wednesday evening.
All right, that sounds good. I hope your dishes are going well.
Yep. Thanks for the review.
You know, I hope you get that 3-day-old cheese off that plate.
Yep. I love that he spelled it out 3D-O.
I like
OH.
that.
That's
I
good.
like that. I like that.
Yeah, so thanks for the review.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mwah.
Yeah. Yeah, other than that though, not a whole lot to say otherwise. This was the only Road Rash on 3DO, unfortunately.
Yeah, but hey, you know, you peaked. You peaked with the first one, you know? Like
if the 3DO can say anything, it has the best Road Rash ever made.
yes. I mean, hey, that's something to say, right?
Yeah.
Like I still haven't played like I really need to sit down and play that PlayStation Sega Saturn one more because the little bit I played of it, I'm like I'm not sure what the big difference is, but it just didn't hit the same way. I don't know why.
It's kind of like how Gex it's identical on like all the consoles, but for some reason it just feels right on the 3DO.
Yeah, as far as I know, like Gex is the exact same on everything. But I think with Road Rash, it was a different dev team, so that might be its excuse for not being the same kind of quality. I think.
I believe Gex was a similar situation where only the 3DO version was actually made by Crystal Dynamics, and the rest were all ports.
I'll have to check that.
I think a lot of 3DO games had that happen when they got ported to other consoles, and that's why a lot of the console versions aren't as fondly remembered as the 3DO originals.
Yeah. You are correct. The PlayStation Sega Saturn version of Gex was done by Beam Software.
Oh, Beam. That's a name.
I know that name.
Yep, they've done a lot.
Yeah. Oh, Chrome Studios. They turned into Chrome Studios.
Chrome. The Thai team.
It's I may be the only human being in the world with this opinion, but I know Chrome Studios from the game they based on the King Arthur movie from the mid 2000s. I played the shit out of that game on my GameCube.
I remember them from Thai, and then they also did the Legend of Spyro series.
Oh yeah, they did. I have one of the Legend of Spyros, and the Thai games are good.
The first 2, anyways. The third one's kind of shit, but
I haven't played the third one.
I
played a bit of the first one and got a kick out of it.
The second one is excellent, an excellent 3D platformer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Road Rash. So what was our saying that we made up for the? It was so it was like the stay away, play, or yay or nay or whatever thing. I forget what we did.
Oh, it was I forget already. Damn.
I know the bad was stay away.
Yeah. Someone will have to correct us or remind us so we can put it in like the notes for the show or something. But yeah, I would say this is it was must play, stay away, or like maybe or something. I forget. But I would say this is a definite must play.
Yeah.
Like if you have any interest at all in the 3DO, or if you're somebody who wants like the biggest hits from the 3DO, Road Rash should be on like near the top of your list. It is a really fun racing game. It holds up fantastically well. It doesn't have a lot of modes, but it has a unique style. It's fun to control. You'll have a blast with it. It can be a little challenging, but nothing too crazy. And at the time, if you'd had a 3DO and you were playing this game, I'd say you're probably like, yeah, I'm doing all right, man.
Yeah, if you were the kid that got this rather than Crash and Burn, you were probably having a much better time.
The one critique I have of Road Rash, I just remembered, is if you're like me and you don't have the music, you know, and you're just racing, you're going to constantly hear that motorcycle ring the whole time. Thankfully, you can turn it off.
That is a nice
And
feature.
yeah, so but it's really funny when you're racing and there's no music, there's no motorcycle sounds, but yet if you bump into somebody or hit somebody, the sound effects come in.
Yeah.
So it's just like dead quiet, and then you'll just hear a bim bim, meow, meow, you know, which is really weird and funny. But that's like
I
really the
remembered
only
what it
critique I
was.
have.
It was must play, okay, or stay away.
That's right.
That's what it was.
Yes. So it is, for me, it is a must play. I really, really enjoyed this game, and I would recommend it to anybody. Regardless of your opinion on 3DO or regardless of your opinion on Road Rash in general, I think this is definitely a game from a bygone era that deserves some respect. In fact, I believe Classic Game Room put this on a pedestal when he reviewed it back in the day.
I'm pretty sure he did, because
if that's worth anything.
He never had great things to say about 3DO, but like I remember he loved this game.
Oh yeah, and when you play it, I think you'll understand.
Yeah, like, I'm also going to say this is a must play. Like if you're have any interest in getting 3DO, like a 3DO console or 3DO anything, this is a must. You got to own Road Rash. It is like an absolute killer app for the system.
Yes. I think if it's not the best game on the system, I would say it's the best racing game for the system. It'll be interesting when we get to like Need for Speed, which is probably the other contender, and kind of compare these two to really see how they are. But for my money, this is like a top 5 3DO game, easily.
Yeah, this is like whenever I pull the 3DO out, like usually my the first thing I do is I'll throw Road Rash in just to make sure the 3DO still works, and I'll play a race.
Nice. Oh, did you want to mention Shredfest at all?
Yeah, I guess we could talk a little bit about it.
Okay. Oh wait, you should. So you're saying a must play as well?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. So throw that on the board. Road Rash is a universal must play. What do we give Crash and Burn? I think I said stay away.
You said stay away. I said okay.
Okay. All right. We need to make like a spreadsheet so we can keep track of those.
Yeah. I'll see if I can throw something together.
Yeah. So yeah, Shredfest, which I believe was meant to be a Road Rash type game, but for snowboarding.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, it was supposed to be 3DO, Saturn, and PS1.
Yeah,
and it didn't happen.
No, a lot of things tied to 3DO did not happen, because also Road Rash was supposed to this version of Road Rash was also supposed to appear on the Atari Jaguar, and that also did not happen.
That would have been very interesting. It's weird. This is like a game from the 90s that has a PC port, but there's no Nintendo version at all.
No, there isn't, because
there was Road Rash 64, and then there was the GBA port of the very last Road Rash, and that was it.
Yeah, because at the time, so 94, the Super Nintendo was still out, and there was no way this was going to run on the Super Nintendo. Even with like the Super FX chip, I don't think it would work.
No, and they never brought over the Sega Genesis ones to Super Nintendo, which they probably could have done.
I think so the thing about those games are they run really quick, and I don't think the Super Nintendo's processor could have handled it. Or it probably could have, but they wouldn't have been as fast.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because that was the one thing the Genesis had over the Super Nintendo.
And they made sure you knew it.
Well, I always laugh because they always said blast processing. Whenever people joke about the blast processing, I'm always like, it's technically right. Like, that was the Genesis's strong suit.
Yeah, it wasn't named blast processing or anything, but...
No, so apparently blast processing is actually a completely unrelated, like, feature the Genesis had that, like, has nothing to do with what it's been associated to.
Yeah, exactly. It's all marketing BS.
Yeah. The Genesis was faster, though, so it wasn't a lie.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'm curious, what game should we do next? Thinking maybe move away from EA for a bit.
Yeah, and not a racing game, since we've done 2 racing games
two in a row.
back. Let's see, I'm looking at my stuff. Do you want to do You want to do Twisted?
Twisted the game? Yeah, let's do Twisted the game show. That's a.
Do you want to do Twisted and Club 3DO as like a double, or do you just want to do one of them?
Let's do one of them because they're pretty different.
Okay.
So I like how I said let's move away from EA and we immediately just pick another EA game.
Well, we could do Club 3DO instead.
I'd rather do Twisted though because Twisted is iconic.
Alrighty. So next week we will do Twisted, the game show.
Yep. I'm gonna have to play it unless I can get Alex to come over and play it. I'm gonna have to play this one alone, but that's fine.
It's okay. I'm gonna play it alone. Don't you worry.
Some of the best full motion video on the 3DO. Not because it's good, just because it's amazing.
Hey, don't spoil next week, all right?
Yeah. It's only a tease. But yeah, so once again, guys, thanks for joining us on the 3DO Experience. The 3DO Experience can be found on all the major podcasting platforms. And if you want to follow us, you can find all of our links at Linktree/The Games, and you can join the GNC Podcast Network Discord server to continue the conversation or just look at some cursed memes. And until next time, guys, we will see you all later.
Bye-bye.
If you're not playing on a 3DO system, what are you playing with?